From KCTS-FM Phoenix, I'm Jamison Greenwood with Greenwood & Company. Well, I hope everybody's having a good week and getting ready for the holiday season, but not getting so ready that you're already bored of it. That's always a risk, especially with Christmas time starting earlier and earlier. Sometimes even in August it starts now, it seems. But in the meantime, I was thinking about one common Christmas tradition. My mother and I did this last year, is going to see Tchaikovsky's ballet, The Nutcracker, and going to the theater for other things like Gene Shepard's Christmas Story has been adapted as a play many times. I see that on often here in Phoenix during the Christmas season. And on that note, I was inspired to share another poem of mine, which is about that phenomenon of going to the theater. You enter the lobby, the sun is now setting. Then you enter the room where you soon will be getting your tickets that act as your key for the evening at the theater tonight and the show you're receiving. The ushers stand smiling, all proper and prim, the men in their ties, and they give you a grin. And the women in dresses will hand you a playbill to ensure that your view of the story is stable. You then enter the theater with red velvet chairs, where you sit yourself down at the stage, then you stare. Then the lighting is dimmed as the show's starting soon. Then the stage is displayed, and you hear Clair de Lune. Then you meet all the characters shown in this play, and discover the conflicts that trouble their days. The protagonist learns they must make a decision, but before this can be, there's a stop, intermission. Now the nicely dressed ushers still waiting outside will discuss the whole story, but still they will hide the mystery solved in the end of the plot, and while wondering on it, you find you cannot forget much of the conflicts while buying your snacks, then return to your seat as to fill in the cracks. You find sympathies felt for these folks now your friends, and their dreams are fulfilled as the story should end. You applaud all the actors who bow for the curtain, and you find that this play now possesses a certain magic which makes it quite hard to forget. Yet this evening's the closing, they must strike the set. But the actors come out first to shake hands and greet you. You inquire for signatures, find they beseech you. Then you look at your watch, and you find that it seems it is time to go home, and to bed, and to dream. Now, of course, you can find all kinds of performers in theaters. You can find dancers, you can find actors, of course, like I talked about in last poem. You can find musicians. But what you will find is that what happens on stage is not always what happens off stage, and that's not really meant to be a bad thing. I'm just saying that actors are really just like you and me, but if they are just like you and me, that means that there are some certain eccentricities. We all have our little quirks that make us who we are, and I observed these quirks firsthand one evening when I went to a jazz concert back in the Arizona high country that my love interest Annabelle was giving at the beloved Mary Lou Higgins Restaurant. On one occasion, my college love interest, Annabelle, had a concert that had to be relocated at the last minute. The auditorium that Annabelle was supposed to perform at with the Mateo Suarez Jazz Band had a pipe burst because of their previous production of Singin' in the Rain. They of course had to make it rain, but then the pipe burst, leaked, and flooded all over the stage, so the band had to find a new venue. They were going to perform at Brubeck's, but decided it was too small to accommodate both the band and the anticipated audience. The only place they would be able to go would be Mary Lou Higgins Restaurant. Now, Mary Lou Higgins has 3 sections that are open to the public. There's a front, a middle, and a back. Mateo Suarez was able to get a hold of the middle section since it had the best acoustics, and they would be far enough removed from the gurgling of the coffee makers and the whizzing of the milkshake mixers. The back section does have seating, but it mainly functions as an arcade where they have pinball machines and skill cranes, which is mainly there for people who can't stay still in restaurants, usually those under the age of 10. Or those over the age of 10 who are angsty because they can't drive and they don't have significant others. However, a group of furries had gathered in the back section. Now, I guess it makes sense for them to hang around a room with skill cranes. It's sort of an affinity with their own kind, I suppose, but with all the bells, whistles, and zwangs that were thumping along in there, I expressed a fear to Annabelle that no one would be able to enjoy the concert.
She relayed this concern to Matteo, who, though he'd remembered to factor in the gurgling of coffee makers and the whistling of milkshake mixers, hadn't considered the arcade. But he figured that the loudness of the instruments would be enough to drown them out, which I suppose is true. The band began setting up, and soon after commenced to play their first few numbers, a Roxy Cost number with Annabelle performing a solo, and another solo by her on a Hoagie Carmichael medley. But soon after, a group of some high school kids sat in the front section, and for some reason they had taken a courtesy glass of water, filled it with ketchup and those jelly packets you get when you order toast or a biscuit, and were finishing it off with salt and pepper, then daring people to drink it. Now, we thought this was absolutely gross, so we paid it no mind, or at least tried to pay it no mind. And the Mateo Suarez band continued with Annabelle playing her saxophone, singing and going back and forth between the two on a number of songs. Now, there's a lot of truck drivers that frequent Mary Lou Higgins, so in addition to the jazz standards, Annabelle even did a couple of jazzed-up country songs by Taylor Swift and Shania Twain for them. At Annabelle's calling, I even went up and sang a couple Frank Sinatra classics, ending with Cole Porter's I Get a Kick Out of You. The band then took an intermission, during which time some of the furries from the game room and the high school kids from the front room began to congregate. Two furries dressed as a gorilla and a grizzly bear began mixing up more jelly ketchup drinks, and even mixed in honey and mustard when they ran out of jelly, and breaking soup crackers into a few of them as well. I'm glad the furries refrained from drinking them, as the vomit remaining in their masks would have perpetuated a smell so appalling it would make a middle school locker room smell like the perfume department at Dillard's. Meanwhile, a larger group of high school kids had joined in with some lion furries in the game room and were engaged in a passionate, tone-deaf performance of I Just Can't Wait to Be King, while other furries and high school thespians served as timekeepers and cheerleaders, clapping along to the beat of Elton John's composition, smiling long enough that their faces would have been frozen in giddy delight before the evening was out. But just as Annabelle, Matteo, and the rest of the band began their next set, starting with Harold Arlen and Johnny Mercer's Accentuate the Positives, Vivian, one of the two waitresses, came to clean off one of the tables the high school kids had abandoned. The strange mixtures in the water glasses aroused suspicion. Upon smelling the mustard honey concoction, her thoughts immediately turned to illicit drugs, and upon watching a purple cat furry mixing another one with a pair of high school girls, she decided to call the police department.
Well, I bet some of you wish that the police constable, Officer Leakey, would get here as quickly as he can, but before we can meet up with him, we have to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll get to find out what became of those high school theater geeks and all the furries. You're listening to Greenwood and Company on KCTS. At the end of a long day, sometimes you just need a cold one. A cool, refreshing blend of wheat, hops, and castor beans for that repellent but refreshing taste. Look no further than Judge Thatcher's Lawful Lager. We'll make your mouth feel cleaner than a freshly sanitized surgical wound, even if you get so drunk you pee your pants. But your piss'll be so sanitary, you'll never need toilet cleaner again. Every time a gavel lands, have Lawful Lager close at hand. Judge Thatcher's Lawful Lager. Available in cans, bottles, or disposable wipes from medical supply distributors. And welcome back. You are listening to Greenwood and Company on the Cactus, KCTS. Now, before the break, Vivian had just contacted the Aspen County Police Department, and soon after, Officer Leakey finally arrived. So Pine Bough's police chief, Officer Leakey, came by in the Chevy Caprice squad car. As his name implied, he first went to the restroom, but came back to talk to Viv. "That's gotta be some sort of illicit substance," said Viv. "Don't you smell that?" Officer Leakey took a long, deep sniff of both the jelly ketchup and the honey mustard. "Just smells like condiments and jelly to me." Officer Leakey then pinched his nose and took a sip of the offending substance. "Officer!" Viv exclaimed. "Would you really risk an addiction?" The police officer spit out the offending substance.
You'd have to mix in about 50 pounds of crack cocaine if you want this to be remotely addictive.
How do we know there's not cocaine in it?
Well, let's ask these kids.
Leaky turned to the furries and thespians.
Did you put cocaine in these?
The kids shook their heads without hesitation. Vivian's eyes went wide. Are you really going to take their word? Aren't you going to frisk them?
Well, did you see them put any cocaine in? Asked Officer Leakey.
No, but why should that matter?
Officer Leakey then gave her a long lecture on the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, which protects against unreasonable search and seizure. This likely did little to restore Vivian's faith in the Constitution, ever cementing her sense that the young people, the Constitution, and the world in general were out to make her life miserable. Once I stepped out of the restroom where I was overhearing this conversation, Officer Leakey returned to the restroom to take another leak. He came out of the men's room, zipped his fly, and was about to leave when the sounds of Be Our Guest caught his attention. Vivian was sulking, much to the annoyance of the police officer, but he thought he found a compromise. You know, he began, they are singing Disney songs. I guess I could arrest them for copyright infringement. At that moment, Officer Leakey walked into the game room and called a halt. I'm sorry, but you all are under arrest for copyright infringement against the Walt Disney Corporation. It was clear that the only people losing money on this performance were the owners of Mary Lou Higgins Restaurant. Mary Lou herself would not mind because she died 20 or 30 years ago, and I seriously doubt that Officer Leakey was going to inform the Disney Company of this copyright violation, lest an actual lawsuit happen. 5 of the teens and 2 of the furries, a lion and a tuxedo-clad fox, were cuffed by Officer Leakey and positioned into the squad car. Officer Leakey paid one last visit to the restroom before leaving, and the rest of the kids and the furries left as Annabelle and the band played their final number, Cole Porter's Don't Look at Me That Way. Heather and Colton had gone on a date in Heather and Annabelle's Subaru, so once the Mateo Suarez Jazz Band packed up their instruments and equipment, I offered to walk Annabelle back to her apartment, and was elated when she agreed. It was a beautiful springtime evening as we walked past the closed-up shops and the window displays in downtown Pine Bow. We stopped at a few of these, discussing the latest book titles in the window of Starlight Books and Stationery, and some of the ceramics and hand-blown glass sculptures we hope to decorate our homes with as we passed the Amber Amarillo Art Gallery. Unlike the sounds of her saxophone, the only music we could hear was the faint clacking of a BNSF freight train in the distance, or the occasional pollution of M&M on someone's car stereo. But overall, the breeze of the night calmed and comforted us as we walked along. The white fire of the stars shone like they should against the high country's navy blue skies, and Annabelle's green eyes reflected them as she acknowledged my thoughts or laughed at the jokes I shared, both the intended and the unintended. Annabelle looked especially gorgeous at night, and part of me longed to try to kiss her when we got to her door. But once we ascended the stairs, I refrained and just gave her a hug. Her lips of raspberry sorbet were as beautiful as the glass vases at Amber Amarillo, but like those fragile vases, Annabelle's lips were better to look at and not to touch. After I said good night to Annabelle, I discovered my route home was blocked by construction, so I had to take a more secluded route through a Ponderosa reserve, a path which took me behind the county's sewage treatment plant and the juvenile correction facility. The smell of digestion of human waste made me want to vomit, and my inability to do so made me wish I'd taken one of those jelly ketchup glasses from Mary Lou Higgins. However, the kids and Juvie didn't seem to mind, as from behind the barbed wire fence, I did not hear the sound of troubled teens trying to kill each other with their bare hands. Rather, there was the faint sound of theater geeks singing, I Just Can't Wait to Be King. Even if Officer Leakey was in the bathroom, as I figured, I knew he didn't consider their offense that serious, and even if he did, I doubt that Disney will sue. You are listening to Greenwood and Company on KCTS.
The holidays are here, and Hobbs Wellington has everything you need for everyone on your list. Dad'll love our wide selection of suits, ties, and overalls. They're stylish and at least look functional, even though you won't find a single pocket in any of our garments. And if you want to wear your suit for family Christmas cards, or a passport photo to evade drug charges, Hobbs Wellington's photo department has just what you need. Holidays may be weary, but Hobbs Wellington makes them worth it. Well, not exactly. 9 locations throughout Arizona. Additional support for Greenwood & Company comes from the Society for Cats with Mathematics Test Anxiety, the Folding Chair Charitable Trusts, and the Save the Floppy Disks Foundation. So we're coming pretty close to the end of another show. We're already getting into the holiday season, as I've often talked about, and I want to talk to you all about our Christmas special that's coming up. I was going to share a story of one of my most memorable Christmas seasons, and when I took a look at it, I realized that it was so long that it's actually going to take us 2 episodes in order to do it. So stay tuned next week. We're going to do our 2-part Greenwood & Company Christmas special. So we'll have Christmas Part 1 will be next week, and Christmas Part 2 will be the week after. And of course, we'll have plenty of poetry and humor as usual. But in the meantime, when I think of the Christmas season, I think of winter, and one of the reasons I chose to go to college in the Arizona high country was because I felt so deprived as a kid not having snow, because I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, a desert where there never is any snow. And so this is a poem that I wrote. This is a haibun, which ends with a haiku and has a longer body at the beginning. And it's one of many poems that I have written on the beauty that I find in fresh fallen snow. In winter, flakes fall from the skies above. They coat the ground below like a white fox's skin. The flakes replace the sycamore leaves, forming an enchanted winter forest. At any moment, a talking deer or squirrel, a rabbit, or even a fox will welcome you to this wonderland of fresh fallen snow, the kind we see in dreams. The brown bears and black bears hibernate now, dreaming of trout and sweet honey in spring. Some humans too long for hibernation, but for others, daydreams of snow begin. While the first flakes fall, polar climates polarize, snowbirds and sunbirds. That brings an end to this week's Greenwood & Company. Our show was created and hosted by yours truly and was written by him along with James Salison and Minnesota Martinez. The engineer is Ivan Crosby. Jonas Andrews answers the phones even though we don't take calls on this program. The theme was composed by Martin Landstrom, and our costumes are provided by Grandma's Garage Thrift Shop. All the characters, settings, and situations depicted in this program, along with all advertised products, are entirely fictional, and any similarities to products, events, or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. Also, KCTS is not an actual radio station. Be sure to like and leave a comment on this podcast, and make sure to follow us on Spotify to get more information about new episodes. And be sure to share this podcast with your friends. Just a reminder to please be careful if you are going out on the 101, the 17, or Route 66 tonight. I'm Jamison Greenwood, and until we meet again, stay healthy, stay safe, and stay young at heart. Good night. This is KCTS FM Phoenix. Stay tuned for Lacking in Substance.